All right. I'm sorry, guys, about the lighting in here. Whenever I move, it adjusts a lot. And I'm on this new TV system, so we'll go with it. So Monta and I have single subject method for our presentation. Okay. The primary goal of the design is that single subject designs are used to show if a particular treatment is effective. So it's not really used to compare one group to another. It's for one person or a small group of people. You provide a treatment, and then you may or may not provide a non-treatment to compare if the treatment worked or not. To be effective, the treatment must be replicated across individuals, not groups. So again, this would be for a student individually. Okay. Let me see if I stay on this side. Okay. Includes a pre-test and post-test design. You'll see that in the next slide. And results are analyzed to determine the effectiveness of the treatment. All right, methodological and sampling approach. The single subject research is quantitative research because you're counting the number of times something happened. We're not sitting there and chit-chatting with them about how they feel about the approach or what they think we should do different for them. We're not even really surveying the students per se. You're sitting back watching things happen and making observations and counting tally marks. Usually an intervention is wanting to be measured. Okay, it requires multiple measures to be taken across different points in time, and it's really typical of psychology. When we were looking up examples for how this might be used in class, a lot of times it seemed like they were using it for special ed students to see if perhaps if they did something different for the special ed students, that they would either behave differently or better, or the not necessarily wanted behavior would stop or be reduced. So single subject design in action. So one of the examples that we found, let me let you read it a little bit. Sorry, I'm having to be close to the board so you can see the screen. Is investigating the effect of praise on reducing disruptive behavior. So step one in this kind of a test would be to establish a frequency baseline or a consistent pattern. So before you even start the treatment, you're going to say, well, how many times is this behavior, that I don't want happening? And you create a tally chart. Okay? That's called your baseline. Then during the implementation, you plot the frequency of the data. And you can also go back to a non-treatment tracking to see if perhaps it was that the student just simply got older or more acclimated to the classroom, so they started behaving better and it wasn't necessarily the treatment. So it's a good way to really test if it's your treatment or if it's some outside factor. So this is what your chart might look like. So this is the frequency of disruptions in the beginning. So this would be on day 1 and day 2 and day 3, that the teacher, whoever was in the room counted 7 on day 1, 6 behavior disruptions on day 6. Whoa, that's wrong. On day 2, they counted 6 behavior disruptions, and on day 3, they counted 7. So it was pretty high. Then when they started to praise the student, which was their treatment here, right, on days 4 through 10, you can see at the beginning it kind of spiked a little bit, but then it went back down and kind of maintained. Then they did the non-treatment again, okay, and you can see that it went back up again. So clearly the treatment of having praise for the student reduced the number of disruptive behaviors. These are some additional examples of charts that you might see. So here's the initial baseline behavior where the students' tally marks go up and down. They decide that the baseline is a number of 10. Then they do the treatment, and in this case it was good that the values went up above the baseline. Here's another one that was over time, where again in group A, the beginning with no treatment, they're here. With treatment, it did go up, and then non-treatment, it went down. And again, it just depends on what you're measuring as to if you want it to increase or decrease, because you could be tracking good behaviors based on the students. If you're more of a PBIS school, you're going to be tracking positive things that the students are having, maybe, as opposed to the non. Oh, I apologize. This one's got a little distorted. So here are some key points that you need to have on your data charts. Okay. You have to have the independent measure, which is down here, the unit of time. So they were in days. Okay. Then you have to have a dependent measure written over here. Okay. Then you have to have your data points and your data path. Oftentimes you see this vertical line that says when the condition changes. So have you provided a treatment or taken away a treatment? You'll separate your graph here. Okay. And then your condition needs to be identified. So you have a baseline and then you have praise. And that's how all of your charts should look if you're completing this kind of research. Okay. Here's some more examples of what we've seen in research. So does music influence a student's speed in math problem solving? So they had students who took the same kind of assessments with no music on. Then they allowed the students to select music to see if it would speed up how they were processing the information. And again, oftentimes we see it when they're modifying behavior. So students with IEP to keep the students on task, and with PBIS. So for instance here, I wouldn't necessarily call it single user research, but we did track the number of absences and stuff in first hour. Then they did provide treatment, so everybody gets a hero point if they're on time, and they wanted to see if that reduced the number of absences. It's a little bit different than the single researcher, but that's the only I could think of that happens at our school. It did not work, by the way. So there's some stuff about alternatives to single subject research, in that with this kind of method, you're only usually providing something for one person at a time. And the reason for that is mostly because some groups believe that having a control group, so that's a group that doesn't receive any kind of treatment, and a treatment group could be harmful to participants. So that's like students who have really severe and profound needs. And so if you were to not provide them with some kind of treatment, that would do them a disservice and harm their learning or their health. And so when you just focus on one student and seeing if something works or doesn't work, it's a shorter period of time usually, over a matter of a few days, and it doesn't harm anybody else in the classroom. You may also not have enough children to participate if they have special needs. So when you're dealing with a lot of students on IEPs in some of your smaller schools, you may not have enough kids to do a larger kind of a study. So under review through single subject, we have reading interventions for special education, enrichment techniques for gifted students, and that's something the district is trying to work on because we've got a lot of issues with our gifted programming here. We have the inclusion of ELs in mainstream classrooms. We have instructions for L1s for ELs in non-ELA subjects. Positive interventions for student behaviors, technology use, and the increase of student achievement. So on Padlet, if you want to go on there, we have a link. We're going to have to post it in the comment section, I believe, whenever I do the video like this. But we're also going to post the whole PowerPoint, so if you'll click through it that way. If you could let us know which topics we'd like to research or read more about through this research method, click on the Padlet link and post at least one idea or topic that interests you. And then we also have a Quizlet. Okay, so we want you to follow this to look further into the applications and features of single subject research design, practice, play, and test yourself. So do you know enough about the single subject survey at the end of this presentation? So go to your Quizlet. If you want to post your scores in presentation comments, like this, you know what you've been doing. And thank you. Make sure that you need to put your comments in the discussion board following the presentation. If you don't, you won't get credit for the discussion board. So please be sure to do that. And thank you.